Hello there, I'm Black White News, and I wanted to talk about this video that keeps kind of coming around and around about Luton being the worst place in the world, and I just have my thoughts about that. So I saw a video the other day. It keeps doing the rounds, so you might have seen it too, confidently declaring Luton one of the worst places to live in Britain. Worse for drugs, apparently, worse for quality of life, one of those neat little verdicts social media loves, decisive, absolute, and completely uninterested in nuance. And I felt a familiar discomfort, not anger, not defensiveness, just a sense that something real was being flattened, because I lived in Luton for 5 years, not as a headline, not as a statistic, but as a resident. I owned a home there, I knew my neighbours, and I loved it. That doesn't mean the criticism is invented. Luton has crime, it has drug issues, it has deprivation in parts. Anyone pretending otherwise would be dishonest, but calling a place the worst doesn't illuminate those problems. It closes the door on understanding them. When you arrive at Luton Interchange, and first impressions matter, you don't emerge into some dystopian nightmare. You see water, you see a lake, you see public art, you see curious sculptures, you see restaurants, people meeting, buses arriving, trains leaving, Costa coffee, you see life. You don't see crowds of people begging, and you don't see chaos, and you see a town centre doing what town centres do. Yes, there are homeless people, but there are homeless people in Brixton and Camden and Manchester and Piccadilly. Homelessness is a national failure, but somehow, when it appears in Luton, it becomes proof of a uniquely broken place. And this is where the story starts to shift, because at some point we have to ask why Luton specifically attracts this level of contempt. Why it's spoken about as though it's one single uniform place, one moral condition, rather than a collection of different neighbourhoods, streets, parishes and lives. Luton isn't one place, it never has been. Stopsley isn't Bury Park. Old Bedford Road isn't Dallow Road. Wigmore doesn't feel like Farley Hill. Anyone who has lived there knows this instinctively. House prices, architecture, atmosphere, they all change street by street. Yet the media rarely reflects that complexity. Luton becomes shorthand, a symbol, a container into which everything uncomfortable can be poured. I lived in Stopsley. When I bought my bungalow, I was the only black person on the street. And I don't want to romanticise this. I faced overt racism, not microaggressions, direct threats. I'm going to set my dogs on you. I'm going to blast my music all night so you won't sleep. That was real. That happened. And yet, this is the part that never survives into rankings and headlines. People are not frozen in the moment you first meet them. I responded with humour. I'm a DJ, so I joked about having a sound clash. Over time, the hostility softened, then it disappeared. 3 years later, we were friends. We looked after each other's homes, put the bins out when someone was away, became neighbours. That story doesn't fit the narrative because it shows something inconvenient, that prejudice doesn't live only in bad areas, and growth doesn't happen only in good ones. It shows that places are made by contact, not caricature. And it also reveals something else. Luton gets spoken about as though it's single failing entity because it's easy. It's administratively one town, one name, one headline. Unlike London or Manchester, it doesn't get broken down into north, south, east, west, into nuance. And so the worst parts come to stand in for the whole. There's another layer here too, one we often talk around rather than through. Luton is unapologetically multicultural. It always has been. It doesn't perform Englishness in a nostalgic or picturesque way. And towns like that are judged differently. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but consistently. Criticism rarely says, I'm uncomfortable with difference. Instead, it says, it doesn't feel right, or it's changed, or I wouldn't choose to live there. Crime becomes the acceptable language for unease. Even as I've been thinking about this, I've caught myself brushing up against the same instinct, noticing how easily language can slide into the very narratives I'm trying to question. That moment of self-awareness matters because it shows how powerful perception is, how quickly it hardens into a story. And once a story takes hold, it has consequences. Reputations affect house prices. It affects investment. It affects whether people feel proud of where they live. It affects whether young people believe their town has a future. When a place is repeatedly labelled the worst, the insult doesn't land on geography. It lands on people. What's striking is that many of the most established communities in Luton are also the least dependent on its reputation. South Asian families who own property, run businesses, raise generations, they're not waiting for outside validation. Their roots are deep. Their lives are embedded. But others feel the weight of the narrative. Newer residents, poorer residents, young people, they absorb the message that their home is lesser, that they are by association lesser. None of this is to deny Luton's problems. Loving a place doesn't mean pretending it's flawless. Crime needs tackling, poverty needs addressing, services need investment, honest conversations matter. But honesty also means resisting lazy conclusions, because when we reduce a town to its worst statistics, we miss the rest of it. We miss the humour, the resilience, the ordinariness, the fact that most people there are just living their lives. Neither tragic nor exceptional enough to trend. So when we ask, is Luton the worst place to live? Maybe the more revealing question is this: what are we really reacting to? And are we responding to crime or to discomfort? To evidence or to unfamiliarity? To reality or to a story we've been told often enough that it feels true? Because once you start asking those questions, the verdict becomes less certain. And Luton stops being a punchline and starts being what it always was: a place, complex, human, and far more interesting than the headlines allow. So I hope that kind of opens the floor a little bit. Not saying that, everybody has to come to Luton or Luton is a fantastic place. But what I'm saying is that when people talk about Luton, they talk about it as though it's one area and that the whole of Luton is bad. Personally, I can be quite a snob. So if Luton was that bad, I wouldn't have lived there. I definitely wouldn't have lived there for 5 years. So I just find it disturbs me, even though I don't live there anymore, but it disturbs me how it can be caricatured. And everybody, when you speak to them, oh, Luton, oh God, you live in Luton. Oh, they haven't got a clue. They don't have a clue because they're only going by what the media tells them. There are some beautiful parts in Luton, really nice parts. And when you think about Old Bedford Road and it looks opposite the park and all the ducks and, you've got these big oak trees and you've got an art gallery in the middle of the park, and during the summer they have not a Punch and Judy show, but they have these little events going on. And and yes, I know the town centre, just like I said earlier about Brixton and Manchester, the town centre, when you see the homeless people there, it's annoying. But you can go through the Arndale. You don't have to go on the street. You can actually walk through the Arndale. They're not allowed in the Arndale. And you can do your little shopping. There's plenty of places to eat. I'm not advertising Luton, by the way, but you'd think I was. But yeah, I'm just trying to say, please don't accept the stereotype. If you've got time in the summer, jump on a train and go and find out for yourself. That's all I'm saying. And that's all I've got to say for now. You take care now. Bye-bye.